My joy is her joy, is his joy, and our joy to share.
Welcome back to another episode of Woo Woo in the Real World. I'm Becky Davis here with my co-host Tammy McCarthy, and we are joined by Tricia Caracappa. And I am so excited because we were just chatting before we started the show here, and Tricia said, I really didn't prep because I speak better from my heart. And we were like, yes, let's do this. This is going to be a great conversation. Speaks
And
better
here we
from
go.
her
We launch, right?
and off we go.
Yeah.
So we're so excited to have you on. I just recently met you through Tammy, actually, through an event that we did last fall at Yellow Studio nearby where we live, where you had the most gorgeous art show that was up.
Oh,
If
thank
I had an
you.
endless budget, I would have just like taken the whole
Fill
thing.
your
I mean,
walls with Trisha's art.
right?
So
So
beautiful.
gorgeous. Yeah, if anybody
Thank
follows
you.
us, if anybody follows us on Instagram, we had a reel that was all about joy, and it was like I think I was like bouncing around in an art gallery with paintings, and those were Trisha's paintings. So go to our Instagram and check that out, and you can also check Trisha out online. But we're so excited to have you here, and Tammy, do you
Yeah,
want to say anything?
welcome.
Do you want to say anything about how your connection with Trisha at the beginning and your connection over joy, like
Yeah,
really sparked?
sure. So welcome, Trisha.
Thank
So
you.
it's just so interesting, right? Because the three of us here, and I'm sure our listeners out there, we all share this common thread of everything is energy, right? And so I had been talking to Tina, who owns Yellow Studio, about collaborating. And we had kicked around a few different ideas and just kind of bringing this idea of these soulful socials and mindfulness into different spots in the community. And so, she talked about the fact that Trisha was going to be having a show at Yellow Studio called Endless Possibilities. And it was all about cultivating joy. And it's like, bingo, that's what we want to do. And so, that day came and Tricia's art filled the gallery space there. And then Becky and I did our woo woo event. And it was all about embracing balance and cultivating joy in this chaotic world, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it was just a wonderful, beautiful event with, women and sharing and just beautiful energy in that room, right? It was just so uplifting.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I just want to kick it off with, Tricia, is, a lot of your background, and particularly if one were to go to your website, which we will link to, obviously, and invite everybody to explore the wonderful world of Tricia's art. But you talk so much about, or describe, I should say, your work, your process, and also, what comes of that, or, these gorgeous canvases. But you talk all about the energy in your work and being an energetic painter, right? So I definitely want to delve into that with you. But before we go there, why don't you just paint a little picture of Tricia, not Tricia that we're looking at on our screen, or, Tricia that we're talking to, but let's just start with 5-year-old Tricia. What were you doing back?
Oh, goodness me. That I definitely didn't prep for.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think first, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on this. I've been following breadcrumbs as I've started to commit to being authentic and living kind of that authentic life and really being doing what I love, which is painting. Um, so I spent a lot of time when I was little drawing and painting and playing with colors. And I look back, this actually was part of my journey as well near the end that made me, I've had a very twisty turny journey of career. So this
We're going to
one
talk about
is
that
one.
too.
Yes. But when I ended up feeling so aligned and committed to um, this one vision that I had back from when I was 5 came about. And I mean, I would play with everything, crayons. I just remember always being fascinated by color. And I can remember even like setting up and, people would play with dolls. I'd play with crayons and match up the colors and be like, okay, let's do like whatever. It was just, um, the Crayola box of 64, right? With if you were lucky enough to get that the sharpener in the
With
back
the
too.
built-in sharpener.
That was
That was
high class.
king.
Yes.
I mean, I'd always inevitably break something off in the sharpener, but yeah, that was great. If you had that, I think mine was so beaten up. Um, but yeah, I just enjoyed drawing all the time. I
Mm.
would like be doing, and believe it or not, the other story that came out of it was floor plans. I started to draw plans of my dream house. Okay, but I'm going to tell you, my dream house had 3/4 of the floor plan was a playroom. So, I mean, that was 5-year-old
That makes sense.
Trisha's idea of like the perfect place.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I was always creating, and or playing in the woods, like just outside, always outside, exploring. Um, I grew up dancing. My mom was a dance instructor, so my time was spent either in the art studio or with her, and it was just something that yeah, it was a lovely place, and my parents both really supported me as and my art, and I did it all the way through high school. Um, but then when it was time to pick college,
Mhm.
I went practical. I still did art all through college, but I majored in the sciences. So I didn't go down that pathway of I felt like it was, I don't know if it was short-sighted, selfish, scary. You could put so many different labels on that. And I did really enjoy math. I had both sides of my brain that were I was interested in. So it wasn't like I despised what I was doing. It was just another aspect of me that I had not explored. And so um, that was interesting as well. And as I was doing that, I was always taking an extra course. And believe it or not, um, my college, after you fulfilled your basic core requirement within the arts, um, they were offering just to any student the opportunity to take a course in addition to your regular course load, free of charge, so long as it was for your sole interests and your improvement and your kind of bettering yourself and not towards your major.
Hmm.
That invitation came my freshman year, and I never once turned it down. So
Mm.
that entire every course that I had, every single semester was in figure drawing and painting and just sketching class, everything that I could get, kind of get a hold of. So I always kept that in my life. And then I said to myself, okay, what am I doing with this? What am I doing with this science degree and this portfolio? And I said, I know, I'll study architecture.
Mm.
So I applied for a master's in architecture, got in, and to a really strong program, and then freaked out. I said,
Mhm.
I didn't really think this was a gut thing. And I didn't really think long about, you know, how am I paying for this? What is the long road? And on top of that, my friends were all getting jobs and
Mhm.
starting their careers. And I felt like I wanted to be able to live on my own. I wanted to be able to have that independence and start my adult life. So I deferred for a year, and in that time spoke with architects, um, who surprisingly all told me don't do it.
Huh.
Um, and you're a 21-year-old kid. You don't quite understand what that means to you, but I ended up um, saying no. I didn't go and continue. And I fell into the finance world. Um, it was just me hitting the streets with my resume, trying to figure myself out. And I remember vividly the day I made the decision to do that career. I was standing in the streets in Manhattan, and I said, it was almost like we all know this, ladies, the F word. Fine, I'll do it.
Always
Mhm.
leads to great things, the
Oh, it
fine.
does. But you know what it did? It actually taught me so much. Number one, I'm grateful for it because it helped me gain independence, right? I
Mm-hmm.
had that apartment I wanted. I was able to become that kind of, pay my bills and figure out what it meant to work in corporate. I did things that were hard that I never pictured myself being. I was in big conference rooms giving presentations and problem solving and then managing departments and then doing all this stuff. And so I I learned a lot. For a long time though, I didn't think I was using my creativity. I thought I had closed the door on that. And I'm so grateful that later on I figured out I had been using it all along in all these different ways that I had never used it before in corporate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean, please feel free to interject. As I said, I hate monologuing, if anything.
Well,
Well,
I
and one
love,
thing I do go ahead, Becky. A couple of questions before we veer down another path, but go ahead.
yeah, I
Yeah,
was just going to say that I love the fact that you are looking at that phase of your life and not looking at it in contempt or with regret, but recognizing that it was an important phase of your life and that it accomplished something that you needed at that time. Because I think a lot of times people can look back or lament that they're not where they want to be yet and then say, look, I did all these things and it was such a waste of time. And I think once you arrive, I don't know that we ever arrive, but when you settle into a space where you feel like you're really embodying, your soul's calling, which is really, we want to talk about that today and what you're doing today that really feels, like very enlivening for you. Sometimes when you get to that spot, you can finally see how all of the pieces along the way got you there. That you needed that
yes.
financial independence, you needed that time. And it's that kind of perspective is comforting when you can get there. And I just highlight it only to say for anybody who's listening who might be lamenting what they're currently doing or hoping that they can move on to something else, just to say that it's all part of the journey, right? And it's only kind of in hindsight that you can see. So I love the fact that you just talked about that and how it served you at that time.
It took a lot of work to get there. That was
Yeah.
not natural. Like
Right.
that was not my go-to opinion about that.
Right.
Um, I've actually gone back and written that a letter to myself at that age and saying thank you. And because in reality, what I'm doing today has been informed and in part supported by that.
Yeah.
Who knew I was so brave to go and do this thing that I thought was just paying my bills then, but in reality, it was helping me today, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
20 plus years later. I mean, that in and of itself deserves gratitude for the decisions that were made. I mean, I wasn't thinking that far ahead, but for some reason I might have been. It might have been in the back of my head. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was not easy. I got to tell you, and I can quickly go down that slippery path again.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but it
So let's
was,
unpack that. Let's unpack that just for a second. Okay.
yeah,
So here you are, you have finished college, you went through this whole soul searching about architect school, no architect school, right? And you land a job in finance in New York City, right? And you're doing stuff. And as you painted that picture, you're doing a lot of things where, you are from, the outside seen as this woman who is accomplishing and being successful and managing
Mm-hmm.
teams and kind of slaying the corporate life, right? Um, how long of a period of time were you doing that before you thought to yourself, or, I'm sure all along the way. So, like, you got home and, before you put your PJs on at night, were you getting out your sketchbook? Were you still keeping that muscle in shape, or had you just put it on a shelf? And then all of a sudden, a few years, whatever that period of time was, was it like, hey, Tricia, remember me? You like to draw, you like to paint, you like color. I'm just curious, what was happening then? Or were you just so focused on just being, young and accomplished and doing your corporate thing?
A word I used to use a lot when I first made the decision, I felt like um, I felt so upset. And I wish now I knew this is, I guess I can't say I wish because maybe I would have gone back and rechanged things. And this is, like I said, everything has that purpose. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't think when I was 21, I thought, how does this feel? Right to me, and my body was giving me all those signals, right? Like this is now I'd be aware of it, but I
Mm-hmm.
guess that's wisdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
um and so at first it was very painful to create. I closed it off, but I'm living in New York City, steps away from the most marvelous museums,
Mm-hmm.
and I went there often. And so it was a bit of the finger in the dike. There was no way that was stopping. Not when it is what calls you.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I was sketching and drawing. I was I was still keeping that up, but nowhere near the level that I had been doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, fast forward, I move out of the city, married, start having kids. And when I moved out of the city, I started to take night classes at the Art Student League in Manhattan because I knew this was something I still wanted to have in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that might have been even before I had kids and while, and then after I had my kids, I started to try to incorporate my art more into my life. So I didn't have the time flexibility or the space to start setting up an art studio and painting and drawing. I grabbed my camera and I was taking 35 millimeter black and white photographs everywhere, learning the camera. So I was letting it in. I was
Mm-hmm.
saying yes. I was open to receiving that creative energy that I had kind of dimmed a switch on, if we want to say, right? And I had turned it up in different space. I had turned it up in my social atmosphere, my ability to learn and adapt into the corporate world was where my creativity was still in existence. And by the way, Becky, this also took a lot of work to get to understand because I, I, for a long time, I really thought I had just shut it off. I wasn't creative at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, I was. I was just different. My creativity couldn't stop. It just transformed that energy thing, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Totally.
I know when you and I had coffee and we had a really interesting conversation about that whole conversation with creativity. Do you remember when we were talking
I
about
do.
that? Would you share with everybody the practice that you did? Because you were saying, how, like you hinted at it just again about how much work it is. And it is. It's work to go back and reconcile parts of ourselves that we feel like that we made a bad choice or we just, look back at it in a different way. And so, well, how did you do that? Give us the exercise if you would.
So, and it just came to me. I started journaling, and I'm kind of jumping around now. So there is a pivotal point that made me dive headfirst back into creative and leave corporate. But I'm putting a bookmark in that for a second. We'll come back to it. Um, when I was diving into my creative world, I needed to resolve some of that stuff because
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it was holding me back. It was a friction that I didn't need in that area anymore. And I needed to understand it. So I had been journaling every day. I have my journaling practice. Um, and I love working through anything that's bothering me or fears or all of that in my journals. So one day I just sat down and started writing a letter to my creativity. I actually wrote a letter of apology. And then the next day, I sat down and I wrote my creativity's response to me. And I had said initially, like, I'm very sorry for, like, closing you off and for all of those years, not recognizing you, not nurturing, so on and so forth, because it did take a while for me to get that muscle back and really feel free with it. And my creativity wrote back and explained everything that I've already said, which is like, I was never closed. You can't. I'm a part of you just as
Yeah.
much as anything else is a part of you. You cannot shut me off. I'm there, and I just came out in a different way for you. And it went through my letter actually had identified a number of examples of that was me and that was me. And I carried you through that. So we went my letters went back and forth for a while until I felt like, wow, I get this and I understand this beyond, yeah, and believe it, not
So
just understand it
beautiful.
in my head.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, it
Is
was
it?
very special. Grateful for that exchange. It's buried somewhere here. I should dig it out and reread it. But yeah, yep.
Were you
Yeah.
working with a therapist at the time or any kind of professional who had suggested that, or is that just an idea that came to you?
Um,
I'm just curious because it's just so beautiful and it seems like it was so
I
powerful for
would love to take full credit for it. I can't imagine. I mean, so I was working with a number of coaches.
you. Hmm.
Um, through different areas. I just found that was another new thing, to ask for help, to like kind of go,
Yeah.
okay, this
Yeah.
is a new world I'm in. How do I get through this? So I was working with a couple of different coaches to try to first develop the business that I had started, and then to kind of go through some of these ideas. So I would guess it was either a
I mean, I
collaborative
just think that's
idea.
important to kind of just, reference because these kinds of decisions and soul searching can be so isolating.
Yeah.
They're so private and personal when anyone is going through it, but especially a woman, especially if you're married, especially if you have kids, and especially for some reason, if you've been immersed in the corporate world, but then you're going or embracing your creative spirit, right? The
Yep.
artist in you. I mean, that's one of the most, complex slopes to navigate not only, as I said, like personally and privately to honor that part of yourself, but then once you start to tell people, they just don't understand, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
So,
Exactly.
true.
I think the fact that you, as you said, like, yeah, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to talk to a coach or see a healer or seek out a therapist, right?
Hmm.
If you don't have that strong personal network, and why not? Why not get the support that you need or someone that can help you navigate through and say, hey, why don't you just sit down with a journal? Why don't you just ask these three questions to yourself or whatever it is,
Right.
right? Because
Right.
that can be the thing that really cracks open for somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, journaling was a huge, and it still is a huge part of my practice. Um, and it's not like a diary. It's nothing like that. My journals some days are just like, oh, look at the birds.
Yeah.
Oh, like, I mean, but to get to that point, it was a challenge. I still haven't mastered the meditation piece of it. I try. I know I can at some point, but I got to focus on it. But it was definitely for a while, my journals were, I hate writing in journals. Why am I doing this? And that was my practice.
I
And
love
then look
that.
at where it got me.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's the thing. I mean, people feel like, I can't commit to writing something down. That's so scary. So then just write that, right?
Right.
yeah, yeah.
This
Exactly.
is
Oh,
so
Yeah.
scary. I feel like whatever it is, right? I feel
Yeah.
so
yep,
insecure. Who's watching me write this? It's just so weird to like just go
Right.
out of your own head and into like a physical space with something that's so personal.
Yeah. Well, it
yep,
gets it out of the way. That's the thing. Just writing it, it releases that energy in a way. It transfers it to the page and then it kind of takes it away from you and outside of you so that other things can start to come through. I'm a big journaler. We talked about that before. I'm a huge journaler as well, and I love that is my processing ground. When I'm unpacking
yep.
something heavy, it's on the page. So let's take the pin out of the storyline here,
Yes. Let's
and
get to the
let's
juiciness
get to
here.
the juiciness, because one of the questions we're asking people this season, and I think this is where we're kind of winding, your story is winding round to, is this woo woo in the real world to us is really about how do we coax our soul into embodied action. What does that look like, right? When we've heard a
Yeah.
whisper, we're feeling called to something. What does it look like to put that into embodied action? And so, tell us a little bit about what your embodied action looks like right now, and then maybe then bridge that gap from how you jumped from where you were to where you are now.
Ooh, okay. I've never approached it that way. I like this. Um,
Okay.
so today I have, I'm an artist, as you mentioned. I'm a painter. I draw. I do all of it. And I have a studio outside of the house. I just had, as you mentioned, my first solo show, which was beautiful and so fulfilling. Um, but that all was kind of brought up from a point of creating from within,
Mm,
following my joy, right?
mm,
Every single day I'd go into that studio and the headset would go in and the music would go on and I'd be dancing, which kind of made me feel a little bit connected to my mom who passed away a few years ago. And just the joy, because I do still have so many elements of what brings me joy, whether it's hikes and or, dancing and spending time with the family. And so kind of embodying all of that and oftentimes also asking myself a question if I was looking to challenge something. Um, if I wanted to do something of color, like how colorful am I willing to be today? Or how intoxicating is like, am I willing to live my life today? Like just from a perspective of taking it all in. Because that one question, I think, embodies not only a goal or an intention, but also a willingness. Because
Mhm.
oftentimes I think we restrict ourselves from feeling the joy, right? So, and some days it's not there. I learned as well to pay attention to that and to have extreme self-trust, which is another big thing. Um, that if when I'm finished, I can walk away. And that ability, these hands will still be able to create something continued tomorrow. It
yeah.
doesn't have to, right? There's a trust there that the next painting will come, that
Mm-hmm.
you can sell the work that's on your wall and you're going to create, it makes room, it makes space for something more in your life. Um, and so I do believe we talked about energy. I do believe that um, the energy that we create. So when I am creating an energy of joy and a place of this is exactly what's lighting me up right now. And I want to do this more than anything. And I am fully loving this. And I'm putting that on the canvas. That is on the canvas for somebody else to receive.
Mm,
Somebody else, not everybody's going to unlock the exact same thing. But that's infectious in the same way that a bad attitude is,
That's right.
right? That positivity um, is just a joy. So part of what I'd love is, and I aspire to do, is to put that. joy that I have, that gratitude that I feel every day that I step into the studio and I'm creating, um, to put that on canvas, and hopefully it inspires other people in their
Yeah.
own ways to feel or find their own joy, or to
Mm.
remind them to go and chase it, right?
Yeah.
And live life, because hey, it's not every day is easy. It is not. But we can
Yeah. So
try to
I just
seek it and find it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one
Yeah.
thing I want to jump in with, because there could be some ladies listening and they really want to get back to painting, or maybe they haven't even started yet, right? But you
Yep.
are a mom of three boys, correct?
Yep. I am.
So how does that get into play? How do you balance that constant I need and want to create, and this is where my joy is, to, oh, I've got to get, there's hockey practice, there's dinner, there's pickups, there's
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, right? So just kind of paint that picture a little bit too, like how you balanced that, and are currently balancing it.
Yeah. I mean, I do think, as with anything, even like when we go and we get routines, we work out, right? We can fall off that and it gets harder to get back into it.
Mm-hmm.
And burnout can happen even when you're doing something that you love, right? You have to have a sustainable practice. So the big thing for me has been finding the time in the day where I can leave and go to my art studio. That's new. I didn't always have that. I had my home art studio, right? So, as the opportunity came up where my schedule became a little bit more available for that, I was able to lean into it and start to create my art in a studio, where I feel like I have a commute. I feel like, even though it's 10 minutes, right? I'm driving and I'm like, okay, it's a time to reset, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
very
Mm-hmm.
creative place for me. And so I will go there, and some days I get a lot done and some days I don't. And that's all okay. So it's that self-trust, it's that forgiveness, it's that acceptance, and that, and remembering that there's abundance with all of this, right? That this will be here
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow. Um, I take it home when I need to. But when the kids were younger, I was squeezing it in. I was doing it with them, right? So I would set the three kids up with easels in the kitchen and just say, go to town. My husband would walk in and be like, oh God, I can't deal with this. It's a crazy mess. I couldn't always create then at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, but I felt like it made them understand what it was. But I could do like a sketch or do something of them. Um, the big boxes that would come when they were really little, I'd put them outside. They'd all sit, three of them in the big box, and they would paint the box, because
Mm-hmm.
it was like, it was great. And then I would set up my easel outside by them. So I'd find little times. I know one artist, who would do a painting for, or a drawing on a paper, um, for the amount of time that she had. So if she'd write the start time on the back, she'd begin doing her work. As soon as she was interrupted, the painting was done, and
Hmm.
she'd put the finish time on the back.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so the reality is, especially I think I've leaned into abstract art a lot more recently, um, in part because I felt it helped, it was a clearer conduit for expressing my joy and
Mm-hmm.
just it felt more free. And I was craving that freedom. Um, but I do think abstract art, or any type, we declare when it's a finished piece.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
artist does, right? Not anything else. It could be halfway finished, and in what you might have thought it was started out, but it ends up finished. So I think setting that bar for us, even if, like, we talked a few times, Tammy, about meditation, and maybe our goal is 20 minutes, but today it was 2.
Right.
That's okay, right? If your goal is to have a full finished 8 by 10 picture, finished color, everything, but all you got to do was the black and white sketch, great. That's it, maybe that day. Or you come back to it and you trust that you can continue it the next day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's so
So I
beautiful.
think that's probably the secret,
Mm-hmm.
is there are no rules in art, no rules. And probably only the restrictions we put on ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think we could just reset and redefine what success is. And in
Hmm.
that day with little kids, success might be taking the papers out and setting up the workstation. And tomorrow it's actually putting the pen to paper.
Yeah.
That is
So
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, what about, do you have those times? Because, for the skeptic out there that might be listening, do you have those times where your inner critic is just really trying to take over?
oh, is this an hour or 2 or 3 hours that we're going to talk?
uh-huh.
Exactly.
Oh,
Right.
a thousand
Because,
percent.
everything that you're saying is so beautiful, right? I mean, challenges come up, but your creative force was so strong and you were open to it every throughout your life. I'm not going to say like all the time or whatever, but just in terms of this conversation, you are painting this picture of, you're someone who um you were really working with that aspect of yourself, even though there were times where you tampered it down, right? Um, but cultivating joy and turning on music and playing with colors and paint and creating is, people hear that and they go, well, that sounds like fun, right?
It is.
But it can also be very torturous,
Yeah.
right?
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and you don't always create something you like. I mean, there's if you go and you look at any artist's website, I guarantee there's reams and reams of work that just never see the light of day. It
Right,
just doesn't, right?
right, right.
So, it's 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 a practice, right? I'm sorry, but I don't think
But
lawyers and
that is your
doctors are the
meditation.
only
Yeah,
what?
I think that is your meditation.
Yes,
That
it
is
is my
your form
meditation.
of
Yeah.
meditation.
Yes, it is. Thank you for pointing that out. See, acknowledgement, sometimes I don't give myself credit for the
Hmm.
stuff that I am doing. And now I'm also trying to find 10 minutes to sit cross-legged and, quietly, which I do try to do. But sometimes that 10 minutes is just turning the radio off on a 10-minute drive, right?
Yeah.
And sitting in
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
quiet. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's the inner critic is always there.
Mm.
It's always there. Um, Fear is always there. Worry, one thing, and art has taught me so much stuff about life that I'm just still trying to like incorporate in. But like, what's interesting is I said I create from my joy. As soon
Hmm.
as I start to let or invite in, oh, I wonder if anyone else is going to like this, or I
Ah,
wonder if this will sell. It's a it disrupts the whole process. It can just absolutely mess it up. I have to trust that the people that are going to connect with my art are going to find my artwork, are going to find something special and connect with it, maybe in their own way and not one way that's me at all, that has any of my understanding of the piece. Um, and those are the people that will be there and support me and be my collectors.
yeah.
So I have to trust that that's going to happen. And it's a process. It is definitely a process. I do also think talking about energy, right? Um, I do believe that as soon as we feel fear over our back, which is an energy,
Hmm.
um, look forward because usually we're getting closer to what we want, right? And the
Yes.
bigger that is, the louder that critic is, I think it's almost like a Marco Polo game. Like you're actually really close.
Yes. Yes, I love that
Exactly.
analogy.
Yes.
That's perfect. It's a Marco Polo game. It really is. It's true. That's, yeah, the more resistant you feel towards something is usually it means that you are pretty daggone close or you're zoning in on something that's pretty great. Um,
Right.
I love the fact that you keep talking about trusting yourself and allowing what is coming through you to come out, and then it will find who it's supposed to connect with. And you had mentioned
Hmm.
earlier about living your kind of most authentic life. And I'm just kind of curious if that journey to living your most authentic life, did that parallel with getting back to art? Did that have anything to do with, like you had mentioned, a pivotal moment in your
Yes.
journey?
Yes. Oh
Can you?
my gosh, you are so good at this.
Yeah, I want you to connect those dots, right? Like the conversation's so good, and I just want to
Becky's
connect
the
that
dot
dot
connector.
there.
I am. I love it. So, this 100%. So, I'll paint the picture for you, for my pivotal moment, which was a moment that had a long tail to it, right? So it takes time. But I'm sitting in a meeting, uh, middle of Midtown, New York City, surrounded by these heads of departments talking about trying to, I don't know, solve something. And I had a moment where I went, oh my God, they loved this. Like from their core, I could tell they loved this. And all along through this, I enjoyed it. And there were aspects of it that I really loved, especially connecting with the people. Um, but it wasn't the same energy I was getting and reading from the room. Um, and what I thought immediately was, I deserve that too.
Wow.
I deserve to love my every moment too.
Mm.
And I left that day. Now, the idea had always popped up in my head, like I think I should be doing something else, but it kind of squashed it, right? You've got a family depending upon you.
Ding, 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 ding,
You've
ding.
built a life.
Hmm.
And then the
Yeah.
second they did that, like maybe you'd be asked to take on a bigger role. Like there was always this next kind of thing, nugget.
Hmm.
And I never weighed against that the cost,
Mm.
the intangible cost on me doing something that I loved. And
Hmm.
so at that moment, I still didn't know what. And I'm sitting with this job, right? I'm deep in my career. And so I went home that day and I said, okay, I got to figure this out. And I started every day when I stepped off the train. Um, and when I'm at these kind of impasse, I go back to my faith and I think, okay, I think that God would want me to find success and happiness and joy in this life. It is not meant to be swimming upstream all the time.
Mm.
And so I stepped off the train every day and I said a prayer on my commute. Please point me in the direction of what's going to bring me joy.
Mm.
Show me signs. And I don't know if that went on for a week, 2 weeks, a month. I have no idea. But shortly after that, I then started to write down the signs
Yeah.
that I started to see because I would forget them easily.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a funny common denominator. I'm going to share some of the signs. Um, they all were around ladies' rooms, bathrooms. Just don't. So that obviously had not part of my direction, but signs came up everywhere for me after I put that into my practice. And one of them was having cocktails after work with my colleagues, and in the ladies' room, some woman goes, "Excuse me, can I ask your advice? I'm here to design this ladies' room. I'm an interior designer, and I'd love your advice on what you think this room needs." And I'm like, "Can I wash my hands first?" And so I was like, "Okay." And then another time, I'm on vacation and I'm standing in line at the ladies' room, and and I start chatting with this woman who she's a shoe designer and she just has a trunk sale happening. She's a brand new shoe designer. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, 100% I am pulled to be going back to a world of creativity where I'm
Mm.
speaking to my creative self. And that is at the forefront and authentic to me. And it felt so right. But where? So I decided, I'm like, well, I went back in my mind, when did I last feel that it was aligned with me? And I realized it was when I was back at college, doing that as part of my everyday, and I was making the decision to do architecture or not.
Mm.
Now, at this point in my life, I did not want to go back to school for architecture. Felt very confident in that. But then I remembered that floor plan I did as a 5-year old. And I said, well, maybe there's something there. So, still working full time, I applied and ended up getting in and going to Parsons and got my degree in interior design. And as I was doing that, we were learning all of the rendering. Now, mind you, too, right? There's a lot of, I was not the youngest one there. I was on the other side of that spectrum at this point, but it meant so much to me.
Yeah.
So, my kids were still in elementary school back then. I remember my middle son asking me, Mom, you didn't go to college?
Mm.
And I said, No, I went to college. I said, I want to go back and learn something new. He goes, Wait, you want to go to school?
Are you okay, Mom?
Um,
What's happening,
exactly.
Mom? Right?
And it was at that point also that I realized my kids, even though, it's not easy to be an artist with young kids, but I owed it to them too,
Yeah.
just as much as to myself, that they knew me for me. And they saw me go after something that I was very passionate about and that I loved and that I was pulled towards and that was a gift and that I recognized my gift and that I wanted to share it with the world. And so my days when I was going to Parsons, I'm working full time. I had navigated that time where I could have a day and I wasn't going into the office and I would take a classes or night classes. I'd go home, I'd help them with homework, and then I'd start on my own. I'd go to bed
Mm.
at 2 in the morning and I'd wake up at 5. And that was it felt so I was so determined to do
Mhm.
this. And it felt so right. And it wasn't, while it sounds hard, and it was hard at the time, I had a fire, I had a
Yeah.
drive. I was so excited and so to be in this new world. And it was interesting around that time as well. There was an opportunity, as I said, right? There's always something else that gets put in front of you to make you question what you're doing. And the question came back at me. My boss had left the firm and they were looking to fill the spot. And so I knew they were waiting. The global head was waiting for me or everybody, to kind of throw their hats in the ring. And I said, I got to think about this. So I really thought, take that step, that moment away. And I walked in and I said, I want to talk to you about that job. And I saw the head go, okay, sit down. And I was like, I just want you to know I don't want it.
Mm.
And as a matter of fact, I want to go down to 3 days a week and I want to work for this other person in this other role. And so I was balancing both, trying to figure out one world while I was still finishing up the other because
Yeah.
I knew I could retire. Um, after a certain amount of time, I had another year, and I gave in my years. I had to give a year's notice, so I gave in that notice for retirement and finished up my last semester of Parsons. And I had been at the time working for an architecture and interior design firm. And I had a client as soon as I had said that, and I knew I was retiring. I had to finish up work. Um, all of a sudden, I had my own client. So I
Mm.
left that firm and I started my own and I started to do that. And that's when I got a coach as well for how do I build this business? It's just me. And
Mhm.
I ended up doing working on a couple of jobs then for interior design. Um, but as I was doing it, and we had been, as I mentioned as well, when I was getting this degree, we were learning the tools of um, the electronic hand renderings, but I fell into loving the hand renderings. And my
Mhm.
teachers had said, wow, you have a really strong hand for that. And I was like, well,
Mm-hmm.
that's because I'm actually an artist. And then I pulled that into my business. And as I was doing that and working with this coach, and it was with a group of women starting their own businesses as well, all entrepreneurs, all different worlds of entrepreneurship. And I was really struggling with how do I define this business, this interior design business. And I said, I feel like I'm in the right arena, but I haven't hit the bullseye. And there was one woman on this meeting that's asked me this question. She said, if you were in a room filled of opportunities and success was guaranteed, what would you run to? And the pause came over me and the tears started coming down my face. Now, how many years of corporate? Never did they do that. No
Right.
way did a female. No way. So
Mm-mm.
this was new to me. And I said I'd be an artist.
Mm.
It was without any doubt that was like that would be the dream.
Yeah.
And so with that, I started to pivot again. And I said, I owe it to myself to do this. And it was 1000%. And is it easy? No. There's many other ways that are easier to
Yeah.
earn a living. But it brings me the most joy that, you know, and honestly, a lot of it is because of that girl that made that decision back on that, like that yes, so that I could start to kind of explore who am I and this that was an area and this was an area and now I know,
Yeah.
this is it.
I
So
love this beginning of that story, and because I don't know if you realize that you bookend that. Like you
I
bookended
did.
your story. The beginning started with I'm sitting in this room with all these people who love their job. They love what they're doing, and I deserve that same thing. I owe it to myself to get that. And then that's
Yep.
how you ended kind of that journey of saying, I owe this to myself to go do this. And I think
Yeah.
that's beautiful, and through honoring that for yourself, like people like us get to see your art and get to be influenced by it and get to, be surrounded by it, and just how it moves us is a completely different experience. And so it's, thank you for going on your journey and listening and trusting in all the work that you've done to get to
I
the
am,
spot where you are.
yeah, I
Yeah, I
am.
think too, I just want to say that this idea of willingness, right,
Mm-hmm.
is key to your journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so many times that people start to kind of say, well, what is it that I really want to do? Like if they start to do some soul searching, right? Or they've got a career or a job, for example, and it's just not working for them, they can come up with, and I've done this, how many excuses as to why you can't make that move or that jump or take that leap of faith or
Yes.
trust in your own self
Yes.
to do
Right.
that thing that brings you joy, right? um but the willingness, and then to get on the other side of that, I mean, you got yourself this interior design education, right? You amazingly working a full-time job as a mom, you going to school, you're just like not missing a beat. However, you find yourself in a situation where you're like, okay, I'm totally honoring myself here, but as you described it, you haven't hit the bullseye,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So isn't that interesting? Some people would be like, oh, she did it, she got herself out of corporate and now she's in a creative field. Good job, Tricia. And you're like, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on, we're not there yet. And I just want to honor that, because I
Yes.
just think that that was a really incredibly hard thing to do. it's super inspiring, right? And Becky and I talk about this all the time. It's like, just because you're doing the work and you're making the decisions and you're willing and able to show up and you'll say, I'll do whatever I have to do. I just want to follow my bliss, follow my joy, even if it means I'm going to bed at 2 and I'm getting up at 5, right? But then you're still not done. It's not like we talk about this. Like, it's not that you have arrived and now, Tricia, everything is great. Your life is perfect, right? No.
No.
And now you've got to get yourself, to the studio or wherever it is that you create, right?
Yeah.
Um, and not easy, not easy.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's a difference between easy and easeful.
Mm. What do you mean by that?
I mean, there are things that I think you can feel, it still takes work. It still takes an effort, but it's which means that it's not easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Easy is, I don't even, like there are things that you don't think about that you do by rote, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But to feel easeful or an ease with it means you're relaxed, you're
Mm.
comfortable, you have contentment and drive at the same time. And to be able to hold those two things together is a gift,
Yeah.
right? To be able to sit where you are and appreciate it and really um, enjoy it and feel that in and of itself it's success, right? But yet to have a vision and a drive to go further at the same time without diminishing what you experience today, that is, I think that's a goal. Like that's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing to be able to hold every day,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, I love that.
I mean, who knows if there's more down the pathway. This is it for this is great now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, and I
Do you
have
have
so
any
much
kids
more to
living at
learn.
home? Do you have any kids living at home?
I have one, yep,
Yeah.
one, two at college, one
Mm-hmm.
home. Yep.
Just listening to you and this conversation that we're having, I mean, I haven't watched an award show in forever, right? And I was feeling like in a little bit of a funk the other day. It was the day that the Emmys were on for whatever reason. I don't know why. And so my husband goes, you know what? Let's just watch the Emmys. I'm like, I'm not watching the Emmys. I mean, the award shows are just so. But for whatever reason, we're sitting in this little area that we like to just chill out in, and that iPad is there, and he just puts it on. And I think because probably I just needed a mindless kind of shift. But I have to say, it was a really well produced, and not probably like the viewership was down because also the NFL playoff game was on or whatever, right? However, I thought it was really well produced, and I just keep going back and watching the clip of this woman. And I haven't even seen the show, but she's Niecy Nash Betts, and she
Oh yeah.
won for the Jeffrey Dahmer story. And amazing woman with just such a presence, and she goes up to accept her award, and she's saying a few things right off the bat that normally everybody says, and then she takes this turn of, I would like to thank me, right? And she goes into this like beautiful acceptance speech. But then there was a clip where in the back room with the press where this woman was pressing her and said, your speech was so inspiring, why did you feel like you needed to take a moment and thank yourself? And basically, in a nutshell, and I'm paraphrasing, she said, because no one knows the rejection, the nights that I put my head on the pillow and I cried, the tough decisions that I made. And she's going into all of these things, right? And just really painting the picture of just how hard the journey is, and especially for a woman of color, right? And she goes, they don't call it mama esteem, they don't call it they esteem, they don't call it she esteem, it's self-esteem, right? And it was so beautiful. And that's what I think the essence of what you're describing, Tricia, is that and we're touching on it. We're sort of teasing out your journey, because if someone were to look at you and you're beautiful and you make this beautiful art and you talk about energy and painting and all of those things, but at the end of the day, like every single one of us, the choices and the journey along the way and the ups and downs and the peaks and valleys and the fact that you were willing to have a
Mm-hmm.
full-time job, enroll at Parsons School of Design while your kids were in elementary school, right? And never miss a beat for what you had to do. I just think these are the kinds of stories that we all need to hear, right? Because, if someone were to go to my Instagram or yours or Becky's, that's our highlight reel, right? These are the moments that we're
Hmm.
proud of and that we're sharing. But back in the day when we were all doing these struggles, right? And you were going to Parsons, there wasn't Instagram, right? So that, Tricia, is a long, long time ago, but it led to this person and this woman that you are and this artist that you are sharing your gifts with the world. And I love that. And that's really what it all comes down to, is that that's what we're really meant to do, is
Yeah.
we've got it all in us from the moment we're born. And look, 5-year-old, the best thing that gave you so much joy was that 64 crayons in a box with the built-in sharpener, right? And so, Becky and I just love having these conversations of like, yeah, we just need to go back to that moment when we're
Mm-hmm.
so overwhelmed and say, hold on a second. Like, I know who I am. This is who I was, and this is what I like to do. And it can be so clarifying for somebody who's listening out there, who feels lost, who feels isolated, who doesn't know where to turn, who might not have a strong support system.
Mm-hmm.
If there's one woman listening to this right now and she goes, hold on, what was I like when I was 5? And it starts a process for her.
Hmm.
Like, I love that. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that,
Mm-hmm.
what it's all about? So, yeah, thank you for sharing that journey with us. It's not easy. But there are some clues and some signs that can help us really start to unpack it and make it a little easier.
Yep, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. So, Tricia, tell the good people where they can see your beautiful highlight reel on Instagram, where they can catch you online and check out your beautiful artwork.
So, online, my website is www.triciacaracappa.com. And my Instagram is at Tricia Caracappa Art. So, yes.
Wonderful. And we will put both of those things in the show notes so that people can get to them easy. We'll make that ease.
Yay.
What was it? Easeful
Mm,
Yes.
and easy. We'll make that one both.
yeah,
Perfect.
and you have
I
a
like
show
that.
going. Well, I guess we don't know when this is going to air, so scratch that. There's there's some artwork that's up at Yellow Studio right now, right? The Facet Show.
Yes, I have one piece in that. But my work is always on my website, so and my
Okay.
Instagram. So yeah,
And what
on
people
top of
can
it.
see.
But no, yes.
Okay.
Wonderful. This has been this time flew. I mean, completely flew, and I feel like we barely scratched the surface. This was
I know. We've been chatting away here
amazing.
for like over an hour,
I know
Yes,
we
which is
I
have.
know.
amazing. I mean, again, I feel
Yes.
like yes, we could definitely still keep going, but
No,
the
I think it
point,
was great. Yeah.
yeah, is that you should keep going, Trisha, and keep sharing
Yes,
your
Trisha,
art.
keep going, please. And then, when it evolves again, we'll have another conversation, or maybe we'll just have you back on to talk about the inner critic for those 2 or 3 hours that we.
Yeah,
Well, before
that
we
one might
round
be a
out the
part
show,
one
if
and
there's
part two.
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. I was going to say, just in conclusion, if there was anything that you wanted to share, like anything that you're especially finding a little woo-woo fun with that you wanted to share with our folks.
Um, okay, this is
Rituals that you
something.
have, or okay.
Yeah, this is something. And I'm glad you asked because I think it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One other thing that I learned, I was always quick to accomplish something, get through, and I think this was kind of the quick. I was always moving from one thing to another, right? Especially mom, business, all that stuff. So you'd go through something and you'd accomplish it and be like, oh, okay, what's next on the list? And every day I would wake up and think I felt like I was starting at zero again, like I had more
Mm.
stuff I had to accomplish. And I realized I had not been fully recognizing when you accomplish something.
Mm.
And it is not sitting, it's a full celebration. Get up, dance, jump up and down, whatever it is. I think we need to tell our whole bodies that we
Mhm.
accomplished something. And so it's not, if you want to do it, some days it might just be, hey, I brushed my teeth. Like, this is a huge accomplishment.
Yeah.
And that builds on itself, right?
Hmm.
Um, but other days it's something that's big that gets accomplished. And, when it does, feel that, absorb it. I think, especially I think as women, we're so used to giving, and receiving is a hard thing to be willing to receive. And
Yes.
so if it's hard to receive, at least start practicing by receiving it with a celebration of accomplishment. Turn that music on, have the dance party in the kitchen. I had one
Hmm.
this morning. No one else was home.
I love that.
Love,
So,
I
Yeah.
really love that. I
yes.
think, like you said, we have to feel it with our whole body. Like get up and
Hmm.
move
Yes.
and say, hip, hip, hooray, I did this.
Yeah,
That's
you got
so
to
good.
tell. Yes. Because I mean, it's not just our minds, it's every part of us. And
Yeah.
I think reconnecting with that and making sure that kind of that, a lot of the time, that's when I started to realize I was following what lights me up. It didn't come from my head. And I'm going to go
Hmm.
back circling around, right? It came from my heart. It came from somewhere else that was pulling a tug to do it.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah,
I
I think
love
that's
that.
the tidbit.
So we're gonna do a whole body
We
movement.
are, because we did a whole good episode together.
Sing with me now, Trish.
We
Sing with me
are
now.
digging it.
So that's
Wonderful.
what we've got for you, people.
That's today's show. Everybody move and celebrate that you got to listen to this show all the way through. And maybe you took a nugget out and maybe you wrote something down or who knows. But
Who
it's
knows?
a
But
good way
celebrate
to end.
yourself.
Celebrate yourself and feel it with
Mhm.
your whole heart. I like that. Talk from the heart, feel from the heart. Let's go. All
Yeah.
right.
Trisha, thank you so much. It's been
Thank
such
you,
a
Tricia.
pleasure having you on
Thank
Woo
you
Woo
for
in the
having
Real
me.
World.
Yes,
We'll see you
wonderful show.
around.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.